Hi guys, this is Tekken57 and I'm going to be doing a tutorial today on importing custom meshes. This is tutorial number 4 in the series of importing custom meshes. Today's tutorial I'm going to be focusing on how to import an entire body mesh into a single object in X-Ray. You could use this method for importing characters from 2K20, and the process is much faster than any of the other methods I've described before. You can also use this process for importing older game meshes as well. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to be importing Trend 7 from 2K20, and I'm going to be using two specific Y-object files which have very high polygon counts, which enable us to import these meshes into a single object. Okay, the Y-object files I'm going to be using for this tutorial is the Macho Man 1992 Y-object file. If you open up this Y-object file in X-Ray, you'll notice that it has a mesh which is 8,973 vertices, which is his outfit mesh. So we're going to be injecting the entire body mesh from Trend 7 into object 18. I'm also going to be using a second Y-object file for the attire objects, and the Y-object file that I like to use for attire is the Alexander Wolf entrance Y-object file, because it has a number of attire objects which are very high polygon counts as well. I've already prepared the pack file, so you can see that the jacket is 5,499, and there's quite a few other meshes in here which have very high polygon counts as well, which can be replaced. Once I'm done importing the mesh, I'm going to be detailing how to inject a custom beard mesh and how to get this to move with your facial animations of your mesh. And then thereafter I'm going to be focusing on how to apply masking to your custom meshes so that you can hide specific parts of the body if you want to apply attire objects over certain parts of the mesh. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is you want to import your model into 3D Studio Max. Okay, so you can see I've already imported the Trend 7 mesh into 3D Studio Max. So firstly I'm going to be working on importing the head mesh into our Y-object file. Okay, so I'm going to open up the Macho Man object file, and I'm going to inject the head over object 0. So you can see that the vertex count here is 3,936. Okay, if I select the Trend 7 head mesh, and if I look at the vertex count, you can see that the vertex count here is 3,941, which is a bit more than the 3,936 vertex count in the original Y-object file. So we need to reduce the number of vertices. So there are a number of different ways in which you can do this in 3D Studio Max. I've described how to use the multi-res tool in previous tutorials. So for this tutorial I'm going to be using a different method of reducing the vertex count, and I'm going to be using Pro Optimizer. Okay, so the Pro Optimizer tool allows you to specify specifically how many vertices you want to have, and also it has an algorithm which allows you to keep the UV borders, so that even though you're reducing the vertex count, you do not distort the way the texture appears on the model. So the way in which you do this is you select Keep Textures, and you also select Keep UV Boundaries. So this will ensure that your texture doesn't look too distorted when you reduce the amount of vertices. Okay, I'm going to hit the Calculate button, and you can see that 100% is 3,941. We want to reduce this to 3,936. So I'm going to reduce this to 3,936. Alright, I'm going to hit enter, and it will reduce the amount of vertices. Okay, thereafter I need to apply a normal modifier, because the normals in WWE 2K19 is flipped. So ensure that flip normals is selected, and ensure that UV normals is not selected. Okay, I'm going to export this file. I'm going to select NIF as the file format. You will recall that I've installed the NIF plugin in previous tutorials, which allows me to export in the NIF format. If you are uncertain of how this works, refer to my previous tutorials on installing the NIF plugin. Alright, I'm going to call this head. I'm going to hit save, and I'm also going to select Dark Age of Camelot as a game under options. I'm going to ensure that normals is selected, update tangent space is not selected, and generate strips has to be selected. Alright, I'm going to hit export. Alright, now that we have the mesh in the format, I'm going to turn the import faces on, and I'm going to select import. Okay, I'm going to select the head.nif. Alright. And now the head mesh has been selected. Alright, before we go any further, in order for the head to work in game, there's two things you need to do. First thing you need to do is rig the mesh to the model which you've just imported into, and secondly you need to create custom animations for the head. Alright, now because this already has animations applied to the previous head, we need to disable all of these animations. So I'm going to load the 2K19 animations, and if you double click the animations, you'll see that the mesh gets distorted because it's still trying to apply animations based on the shape of the previous mesh, which was the Macho Man head. So I'm going to click on set animations to neutral. Okay, so that's going to neutralize all of the animations, so you can see that there's no animations being applied. Alright, we're going to do the rigging of the model once we do the body as well. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to import the body into object 18. So we need to have a vertex count of 8,973. Alright. Now, if you look at the body mesh that we imported from 2K20, okay, the vertex count here is 12,761. So obviously we can't import the entire body mesh. Also, when importing the body mesh, I do not import the hands. I use the hands from the original model, because rigging the hands is very, very complex, and you'll find that you sometimes get vertices flying off the screen because they're not rigged correctly to the individual fingers, and it's a very, very lengthy and complicated process to rig the hands in my experience. So if you want to do the hands, you're welcome to try, but I opt not to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to detach the hands from this mesh. So I'm going to select the hand, and I'm going to say detach. Let's call this left hand. Then I'm going to select the right hand. I'm going to detach this. Alright, so now if you look at the vertex count, we have 8,733. Alright, which is lower than this. However, the face count on this model is a little bit higher than the face count on this model is a little bit higher than the face tip count that's listed in X-Ray. Okay, so we are going to have to use an optimized tool here as well to try and get this object to import. Another option you can do is you can detach the feet object, and you can import these separately into the feet objects on the model, which is object 9. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to import the entire mesh, just to show you how you would do it if you need to import an entire mesh. Also note that if you're going to be importing a wrestler which doesn't require certain parts to be rendered, then there's no need to import those parts. For instance, if the wrestler wears tights where the lower body is completely covered, I don't usually import the lower body parts at all, because you're going to mask these anyway, and these are not going to be visible in game. So it depends on what type of mod you are trying to create. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to import the entire body just to show you how you would do it. But remember, you can break up this mesh based on whatever requirements you have. Alright, so I'm going to apply the Pro Optimizer here as well. Okay, once again, I'm going to say keep textures and keep UV boundaries. And from experience, having imported other 2K20 models, I know that applying about a 90% optimization allows the mesh to be imported correctly. But remember, you can customize this value based on how many polygons your mesh has. So I'm going to leave this at 90%. I'm going to apply a normal modifier. Okay, and then I'm going to export this into NIF format. So I'm just going to call this body. Okay, I'm going to select NIF. Dark edge of Kevlar. Alright, now I'm going to import this body mesh over object 18. So I'm going to select inject. I'm going to select the body object. Okay, so now we have entire body mesh imported over object 18. So we want this body mesh to look like the other skin objects in the game. In order to do this, we need to assign a skin shader to this object. Alright, and also we need to ensure that the shader parameters from any other skin object is applied to this object. The reason for this is because the shader parameters will define specific parameters for a skin object, such as the level of sweat, etc. So this object will actually appear like a body part in game rather than a gear object. Now the easiest way to do this is to copy the shader parameter values from one of the other body parts that's in the game. So I'm going to use object 1 because I'm not going to render object 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to render the custom body we've just done. So what we're going to be doing now is swapping the parameter offset and the parameter count between object 1 and object 18, which we've just imported. I'm going to right click, I'm going to say edit parameter offset. I'm just going to make a note of the parameter count in Notepad. And I'm going to take the parameter offset as well. Alright, and then I'm going to do the same for object 18. Alright, now that I have the values, I'm going to insert these values into the meshes. I take the values for object 18. Okay, I've set the value. Now the reason why I'm setting the value for object 1, even though we're not going to be rendering object 1, is if two objects point to the same parameter offset, you'll find that the game crashes. So that's the reason why I'm pointing this to the parameter offset of object 18. Okay, I'm going to set the values of object 18 as well. Alright, now because I have the body texture in the same directory as the Y-object file, if I double click this, it should render the mesh with the body texture applied. So we know we've applied the correct shader parameters. Now I also want to change this to a skin shader, so I'm going to right click and say edit shader, and I'm going to change this to skin. Okay, and then I'm also going to change this shader to gear. The reason for this is because now we are giving the shader parameters for gear to a skin object, which can cause the game to crash. Also, assigning a gear shader to this mesh makes this mesh invisible in game, which is a bonus as well. Alright, so we have the shader parameters. So we have the shader parameter offset, count, and the actual shader value swapped for object 1 and object 18. Now I'm going to be coding a function to do this automatically for you. So if you right click on this and you select swap shader and params with object, this function will automate this process for you, so you don't need to copy the values to Notepad, etc. I'm currently working on this function and it will be in X-Rey 4.2. Alright, so now we have both the objects imported in the game. Now we need to rig these objects to our mesh so that we can try these in game. Alright, so let's do that. So I'm going to export this value. Okay, so I've extracted object 0 and object 18, and now we need to rig these to the original model that we've imported into. So you need to run the script, which I've posted in previous tutorials, which is the ww2k18 PC exclusive script, and import your model into 3D Studio Max. Okay, you have to run this script because this script will import the model with the correct weighting and rigging applied. I've already imported the Macho Man model into 3D Studio Max just to save us some time. And now I'm going to import. And now I'm going to import the objects which we've just exported from X-Ray. Okay, which is object 0 and object 18. Okay, I'm just going to hide the entire parts that we don't need, so that so it's a bit easier for me to rig the model. Okay, that should be fine. Now, firstly, I'm going to start rigging the head, and the manner in which I do this is I like to use the skin wrap modifier. The skin wrap modifier basically looks at the way the skin is done on the underlying objects and tries to apply the same type of skinning and rigging to our custom meshes. For me, this is the easiest method rather than copying the skin modifier from one of the meshes and just pasting it over this, because we want the head object to now try and match the movement of the body object that we've just imported, so that you don't get gaps in the model. Okay, so I'm going to start adding the meshes that I want the skin wrap modifier to be applied to. So I'm going to select the head object from the Macho Man model. I'm going to select the chest, both the arms, and I'm going to select the hands as well. For me, this selection works the best when rigging the head. I'm going to select vertex deformation. I'm going to reduce the fall off to the lowest possible amount, and I'm going to say weight all points. And then thereafter I'm going to click on convert to skin. Okay, as with previous tutorials, you need to ensure that the bone effect limit is the same as the weight count when exporting the weights from 3D Studio Max. So if we look at this, the weight count for this mesh is 7. Okay, so once the skin modifier is created, we go to advanced properties, and then we set the value of the bone effect limit to that of the weight count, which is in this case 7. And then thereafter you run the script to export the weights, which is the export bone weights to file. I'm going to save this in the folder which we are working in. Okay, now I'm going to do the rigging for the body as well. So just remember that the rigging for the body takes a little bit of time, because we need to now rig it to quite a few different body parts. And so I would suggest you save as you are rigging, so that it doesn't cause 3D Studio Max to crash. So just remember to save as you're applying the skin wrap to different meshes. I'm going to start selecting the meshes which the skin wrap modifier needs to work with. So because this is now the entire body, we're going to select pretty much all the body parts from the original Macho Man mesh. So I'm going to select the head first, then I'm going to select the then the chest, then the chest, arms, hands, underwear, both the legs, and also the feet. Okay, so we have a total of 10 meshes which have been selected for the skin wrap, which corresponds to object 0 to object 9 in the game, which is all the body part meshes. Alright, once again ensure that you have vertex deformation selected. Set your fall off value to as low as possible. Weight all points. And then just hit save before you proceed. Sometimes it causes 3D Studio Max to crash. And then hit convert to skin. under advanced parameters, once again you need to set this to the weight count, and in this instance our weight count here is is 7. So I'm going to set this as 7. Thereafter I'm going to run the script to export the bone weights to file, and I'm going to save this as object18.txt. Alright, now we've done the rigging for the head and the body. I'm going to import these back into X-Ray. So for object 1, let's import the weights. And object 18, we're going to do the same. Okay, so now the weights and the rigging have been applied to the model. We are ready to test this in game. Now before we do that, I'm going to unrender all of the attire parts in the Macho Man mesh, so that we'll only see the custom meshes that we've injected. Now you'll notice that Macho Man has object 17, which is a beard object. Now if you are wanting to get rid of this beard object, which you will need to do for custom meshes, you need to ensure that the 00E6 file is not in your pack file. The reason for that is because this is the file which controls the movement of the beard mesh, and if you remove this from your Y object file, you'll find that the game will crash. Because we are going to be importing a custom beard, we do not need this 00E6, and also if you leave the original beard mesh in the game, you find that it completely distorts the mesh. So this, even if you wanted to retain the original beard object, it will not work in game. So therefore, delete these 00E6 when creating your pack file. So if you look at the contents of my pack, you'll see that there's no 00E6 contained. Alright, so let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of all the other objects that we do not need. So I'm going to move object 18 up one to object 17. Okay, and I'm going to reduce our count down to 18 because our count starts from 0 up to 17. Okay, I'm going to import this back into our pack file. The second Y object file, which I'm going to be using for the custom attire objects, I'm just going to render maybe one of the attire objects just to make sure this works in game. Alright, so let's find the boots. Okay, there we go, object 2. So I'm going to swap this with object 1. I'm going to swap this with object 0. And I'm only going to render the boots. Just note with the Alexander Wolf as well, you'll find that sometimes there's a controller file, controller mesh file, which appears under the jacket object, and this controls the movement of the jacket object. You don't want to render this as well, because this can also cause the game to crash. So let me see if I can find it quickly and show you what it looks like. So you'll see this mesh controls the movement of the jacket, so we don't want to render this as well. So we're going to take this out. Alright, so now we have just the boots. I'm going to inject this as our second object file, just to see if our attire works as well. Alright, and we can see that the custom mesh is working in game, although the textures are not displaying correctly. And we can also see that the original body parts from the model are still rendering in game, which we are going to fix just now. Alright, so firstly let's fix the texture problem. Okay, so if you look at the material effect of the body parts, you'll find that these have a material effect of 2. Okay, if we set the material effect of 2 to our custom body mesh, we'll find that this will load the texture correctly in game. So let's change that to 2. Alright, let's import this back into the game. And let's test again. Okay, so now the body texture looks correct. Okay, now we need to get rid of the additional body parts that are not required, and I'm also going to show you how to mask certain parts of the mesh that we do not require. I'm going to run the import www Tekken 57 for masking only script, and I'm going to import the object we've just created. Alright, so now a couple of things we need to know here. So to apply masking for the existing body parts in the game, you will follow the process that's already been established for masking body parts. However, now that we are masking custom meshes, there's some additional work you need to do. Firstly, the game will only apply masking to head and body objects. So there's a way in which these are defined in the Y-object file. For instance, if you right click on the object 0 and you say edit object header, you'll notice that it has a name ID of 0, whereas the remainder of the body parts have a name ID of 1. So if you open the Y-object file in a hex editor and you scroll to the bottom, you'll notice that there's a listing after the material names which lists the mesh names of the object. So here the name ID of 0 corresponds to M head, and the name ID of 1 corresponds to M body. Okay, you don't really need to know this. I'm just giving you some background as to understand how the naming of the meshes work and how this is now applied to masking. So because we want to apply masking to our custom mesh, we need to give it the name of M underscore body. So this is fairly simple to do. If you look at the naming of object 1, you'll find that it is the name ID of 1. So we're going to take the name ID of 1, and then we're going to go into our custom mesh, and we're going to change the name ID of 9 to the name ID of 1. So now this is also assigned to the M underscore body name. Okay, so now that our object is imported into the game, there's another thing that we need to do. The way the game applies masking is it counts the way the game applies masking is that it counts the number of objects which are assigned to a specific name, and then thereafter it assigns a number to this mesh. So for instance, object 0 is assigned to M underscore head, so this will be M underscore head 0. This is assigned to body, so this will be M underscore body 0, M underscore body 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, so now this M underscore body only goes up to object 9. Okay, object 10, etc. is assigned to different names, eye, mouth, etc. So in order for our scripting in 3D Studio Max to work, to export the masking, okay, we need to delete objects 10 up to object 16, because we're not going to be using that. We're not going to be masking the eyes and the mouth and the tongue, etc. And then our custom mesh objects should be named following sequence after object 9. So for instance, our object is called object 17. This should actually be called object 10. Okay, because now we assign this to M underscore body, so this will become N underscore body underscore 9 when we do the export from 3D Studio Max. I know it's a bit confusing at first, but it gets a lot easier as you proceed. Alright, so now we're going to mask the parts that we don't need. So I'm going to select all the polygons for the arms. Okay, all the polygons there. We'll do this for 3 as well. Okay, 4 and 5 are the hands, which we're not going to mask. 6 is the underwear, which we do not need because we have underwear on our custom mesh. 7 and 8 are the legs, so we don't need these as well. I'm going to select all. And the feet also. I'm selecting all the polygons by hitting Control plus A. So we selected the feet as well. Alright, now if you want to do masking on our custom mesh as well, I'm just going to mask maybe the stomach area just for the hell of it, just to show you guys how this works. So I'm just going to select that area. For instance, in case you wanted to mask this area. Alright, I'm going to select that, and Now I'm going to run the script to export the masking for all the objects. Remember, as I said, this has to be named in sequence. So this must be object 10. If you had other custom meshes which follow this, these will be object 11, 12, 13, etc. Okay, I'm going to run script. Export masking for all objects. And it's going to create a CE mask list. Alright. So now that the masking has been imported, exported, we are going to be using POSM's CE editor tool to create a CE file which is going to contain the mask for us. I had to make some coding changes to POSM's CE editor tool to take into account the custom meshes which we are going to be masking now. I'm posting the link to the updated version of his tool in the description below. If you open up the CE editor, you will notice it has the title of CE editor 2.0. You must use 2.0 or it will not take into account the custom mesh mask that we applied. Alright, so now I'm going to open these. So now I'm going to open up the CE mask list file using the import faces command, and I'm going to be selecting the CE mask list text file which you've just exported from 3D Studio Max. Alright, and you can see that it's applied, and you can see that it now has all the masks which are listed. So our mesh is called object 10, and you can see that it's imported this as m_body_9_0, because the counts in game start from 0, therefore object 10 is counted as 9. I'm going to say save. Alright, and now I'm going to import the CE file which we've just created into our pack file, and then I'm going to copy this back into the game to test if our masking has worked. So let's copy this and we paste this back into the game. Alright, so you can see that the original body parts are no longer being rendered. It looks like I forgot to do the masking for the left arm, so I can redo that at some point. But you can see everything else is not rendering. Also now you notice that the masking we did on our custom mesh over the stomach area is not appearing in game. That's because I haven't injected the Y object with the correct mesh name. So let's inject this and see what happens. Okay, and you can see now that it has, and you can see now that our custom mesh has the correct name ID. The masking is now being applied to our custom mesh object as well. Alright, so that covers masking. Now I'm going to be focusing on how to import a custom beard into your mesh. So I'm going to be importing his combinations mesh from 2K20. If you look at the word count, that's 3,628. Now the trick in which to get this to work in game and to get it to follow the animations that you're creating for your new mesh is to inject this over the head object. Okay, so I'm just going to render the boots and the head object of our secondary mesh. Okay, I'm going to inject the beard over the head object. So let's export this from 3D Studio Max. This is 3,628, so it might work because we have a word count of 3,936. Okay, just remember to apply the normal map modifier before exporting the beard object. You can see it's imported correctly. Now because this is injected over a head mesh, this also has animations assigned. So I'm going to load animations 2K18 upwards, and I'm going to neutralize all the animations because this is going to mess the beard object up completely. Alright, now that we have the beard object created, we want this to actually look like a beard as well. So we need to get the shader parameters for a beard object and import this over the mesh that we've just done. Now, if your Y object does not have a beard mesh contained within it, you can take the shader parameters from any other Y object in game and inject this into our object. So I'm just going to open the Alexander Wolf Y object file, the original Alexander Wolf Y object file, because he has a beard, and I'm going to take the shader parameters from here. Okay, so let's right click, say edit shader parameters. I'm going to export the values. I'm just going to call the shader parameters beard. Okay, so let's just take note of the parameter count as well. So parameter count is, in this case, 31. Okay, so we need to change our parameter count of our object as well to 31, and we also need to change the shader to that of a hair shader. Okay, so let's go back to our custom mesh object and let's do that. Alright, so firstly let's change the parameter count to 31, which is the number of parameters we're going to be importing from the beard object. I'm right click and I'm going to say edit shader parameters, and I'm going to import the values we've just exported from the Alexander Wolf. Alright, now importantly here, if you've imported this shader parameters from another Y object file, you need to ensure that the values for the diffuse parameter, normal parameter, and also the material roughness parameter values correspond to the values contained in your material list, meaning that these numbers must correspond to combinations underscore n and combinations underscore mr respectively. Now, I've covered this in a previous tutorial, but I'll just speak about it quickly again. If you click on edit materials, it'll load the list of materials as well as the IDs. Okay, I'm just going to look for combinations, and you notice that combinations is 4F, 50, and 5B. Okay, so these values must be set respectively for each of the maps. So here we have 4F, 50, and 5B, which is correct, and the reason why it is correct is because we are taking the shader parameters from the same Y object file, which is Alexander Wolf. If you have taken this from another Y object file, then the values will not be correct. Alright, so if you've done this correctly, you'll find that now the beard object is taking the shader parameters of a beard object, so it'll look like hair in game. We also need to change the shader value to that of CS hair. I'm just going to make it CS underscore gear just to test to see if the beard works in game, because sometimes CS underscore hair doesn't render due to transparency issues. So let's make it gear, so we'll know definitely it will render in game. And before we can apply this in game, we also need to ensure that the beard is rigged. So I'm just going to export this to beard, and we need to now rig this to the secondary Y object file. In this instance, we are using Alexander Wolf for our secondary Y object, so we need to import Alexander Wolf into 3D Studio Max. Okay, which I've already done here. So I'm going to import the beard object. Okay, so now we've imported the beard object into the game. I'm going to rig this to the model, so I'm going to select the skin wrap modifier. And I'm going to select the head. Alright. And vertex deformation, follow values as low as possible. Weight all points and then convert to skin. Alright, now we've got a skin wrap modifier, and it's created a skin modifier as well. I'm going to select the bone weights. I'm going to set the bone effect limit to 7. Now I'm going to run the script to export the bone weights to file. Okay, I'm just going to call this beard so it doesn't conflict with any of the other names. You can name it whatever you want. Okay, and now I'm going to import the weights for the beard object. Okay, so let's inject this and let's test this in game again. Okay, and now you can see there's a fully rigged beard object, which will move with the facial animations that that you may create for the game. Okay, and if you test this in game, you can see now that you have a beard object which is rendering in game, which will move with the facial animations that you may create at a later point. You can try setting this to a hair shader and see if it works in game. Now there are times in certain Y object files where setting the shader to hair doesn't render the beard at all in game, and you have to render this using the gear shader. So I haven't been able to narrow down why it does it with certain Y object files, and other Y object files it doesn't do it. For example, with Alexander Wolf, when I set the shader to gear, it renders in game. When I set the value to hair, it doesn't render in game. But with Eddie Guerrero, if I set the hair object to hair, it renders perfectly in game. So you will have to try different Y objects files and see which one works for you in game. But for this tutorial, I set the value to gear just to make sure that my process works. Okay, sometimes you'll find that the skin wrap deforms certain parts of the beard because the beard is very far away from the face. In that instance, you need to resize your original head mesh, inject it into your Y object, then import this Y object into 3D Studio Max, and then thereafter apply the beard so that the beard appears flush on the face. Okay, it's not always required, but sometimes you'll find that bits of the beard do not move correctly. Alright, so we've done quite a few things in this tutorial. We've imported a custom head, we've imported a custom torso as a single mesh, we've done masking, and we've also imported a custom beard. So it's quite a bit of information to try and grasp at once, and I understand that this is a very advanced and complex tutorial. So take the time to go through the previous tutorials that I've created if you do not understand any of the concepts that I've described. And also, if you have any questions or comments, you are welcome to post them in the comments below. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it has been useful to you and that you've learned how to import custom meshes in a much simpler and faster manner compared to the previous methods that I've described. Until next time, happy modding, take care.